Kevin Hart and Woody Harrelson team up for the Netflix assassination comedy The Man from Toronto. Can these two bring the comedy? A case of mistaken identity arises after a screw-up sales consultant and the world's deadliest assassin run into each other at a holiday rental. Kevin Hart plays Teddy, an out-of-work gym membership salesman who wants to give his wife a birthday celebration that she's not going to forget. So he books a weekend at a cabin, but after printing out the address to that cabin with a printer that is ridiculously low on toner, he misreads the address, and then he shows up at the wrong place and at the wrong time. We then get a comedy of errors when Teddy is mistaken to be a notorious killer named the Man from Toronto. The real killer is played by Woody Harrelson, and the film showcases a bit of cat and mouse as Teddy has screwed up all sorts of plans for that hired hitman. Now, Teddy then has to travel to several locations to complete tasks in an effort to stop the ultimate villain. Now, I watched Kevin Hart recently in another Netflix show where he got to really flex his dramatic acting skills and then show how he can go dark and deep with character content. In this film, he's not really drawn on any of those skills, but instead is relying on his comedic timing and whiny observations to elicit laughs. Now, there were points that I did chuckle out loud and even snorted a few times because something was either unexpected or very abrupt. But for the majority of this hour and 50-minute movie, the comedy felt forced. When Teddy was in precarious positions and his reactions felt normal, that's when I found them to be the funniest. But when he was pushing a punchline or maybe straining for a laugh, it was obvious and then unfunny. Woody Harrelson was kind of a more stoic and reserved version of his Zombieland persona Tallahassee. Now here he's got some swagger and he uses his situational irritation for some good humor, but a lot of this is him just sort of brooding about and not being a very dynamic character. But even with that, there are moments where we get to see some character growth in him, which I appreciated. He also has some good timing with Hart, so the two of them together create a semi-humorous dysfunctional couple. The film relies on some special effects at different times throughout the storytelling. Now, sometimes it's when characters are traveling to a new locale, or other times when it's special agents or these elite teams having to infiltrate a building and they then have to scale the outside. Well, regardless of what it is though, the special effects are just atrocious. To say that a lot of it is obvious that they were on a green screen is not even sufficient enough to describe the level of bad. I guess to their credit though, they're not as bad as something like a Sharknado movie. But if that's the measuring stick that we're using, this could be a masterpiece. Now, the story is unfortunately a little choppy, where we have to overlook a lot of scenarios where characters would be more skeptical of a situation, but for plot convenience, they just go with it so that everything can continue on without incident. Now, as Teddy is off on his accidental adventure, his wife is being taken care of by the FBI, unbeknownst to her. But she's not suspicious that her husband, who has been reported to be this massive screw-up when it comes to gigs, is supposedly on some huge sales pitch. This alone doesn't ring true. But all along the way, there are scenarios like this where characters go along with the situation, even though, according to common sense, they wouldn't. Now, Harrelson has a sort of handler in this, and the inclusion of this character is completely unnecessary. Even when there are story arcs that involve them later on in the story. And I think the character is in here just to create another scenario that drives the final climax of the film. But there were other ways that this could have come about that would have felt less forced. Now, the final climax of the film was really the best part of the entire thing. While there is some action that takes place during the rest of the movie, and there's this one scene in particular that is pretty wild, this final sequence is really fun and epic. There's an all-out fight where the camera is bouncing around between the subjects, capturing a ton of the action. And it's immersive and it's choreographed really well to be energetic, hectic, and full of excitement. And even though there are definite edit points, the majority of it is edited in a way to make it appear like it's one continuous take, which then was also exciting to watch. Now, I really wish the film wouldn't have waited until the end to showcase something like this, because there were opportunities to have sequences like this earlier on to increase the excitement. It wouldn't have helped the story's thinness, but at least it would have been fun to watch. Now, there are portions of this story that reminded me a lot of the Bruce Willis action comedy Red. There are people after other people, and when those groups clash, violent chaos erupts. But along the way, there are ridiculous scenarios and good laughs. Now, for that last part, specifically, I was only talking about Red. This movie wants to be Red in certain aspects, but it falls short. And that's really a shame, because I think both Kevin Hart and Woody Harrelson are good on their own, and in this, they even have some workable chemistry together. The story premise is a decent one also, allowing an everyman to get caught up in a world that he has no business being in. To watch the comedy of errors that come about because of mistaken identity does present some potentially enjoyable story arcs, but what we get in the final execution feels tired and unoriginal. The villains in this story are thinly developed and almost of no consequence. I mean, their goal is very clearly defined, but it was extremely hard for me to even care, let alone get behind the fact that Teddy is the linchpin for thwarting the plans. I wanted to like this movie, especially because Teddy is an endearing character. Yeah, I mean, he is a screw up at times, but we see his ambition and his passion and even his attempts at greatness. And he takes chances on bettering himself. He just doesn't have all the skills that are necessary to do so. Or maybe it's just the confidence that he lacks. But the story execution is lackluster, with a narrative that feels too familiar to be fully engaging. So overall, The Man from Toronto has some good potential to be a good action buddy comedy. Some of the comedy works, and the final action sequence is incredibly exciting, with an immersive filming style that puts us right into the fight. Unfortunately, though, to get to that point, we sit through sequences of forced humor, terrible special effects, and underdeveloped villains with a dastardly plan that is incredibly dull. Both Kevin Hart and Woody Harrelson bring their charisma to the story, but it's not enough to drag this out of mediocrity. There's no sex or nudity, but there is a ton of profanity and a lot of violence. I give The Man from Toronto 2 out of 5 couches. What's an action comedy that you really enjoy? Let me know some of your favorites in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching.